Today we're looking at Unit 6, Notes number 5, the European Front. So we're actually now going to begin discussing battles in Europe that the U.S. was involved in. So first, let's look at a map of Europe. So we're going to look at where the U.S. decides to kind of make their movements into Europe. We'll be talking about Operation Torch. So the U.S. began their European, I know it's Africa, not Europe, but they began in northern Africa, 1942, then moved into the Italian campaign, 1943 through 1945. And then we'll briefly discuss Operation Overlord, also known as D-Day, but we'll get more description about D-Day in our next set of notes. So this is primarily where we're looking, kind of tracing the movements of U.S. soldiers. So the Allied War Plan. December 22nd, 1941, so again, just a few weeks after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, FDR and Churchill meet to design the Allied plan for victory. So they have to discuss, where are they going to send troops? Where is the fighting going to start? They were meeting without Stalin, and they made two key decisions. One, they felt Hitler was the bigger threat, so the defeat of Germany and Italy was the Allies' top priority. And number two, only an unconditional surrender from the Axis powers would be accepted. So despite Stalin's distrust of the West, he agrees to ally with the U.S. and England, and so they form the Allied powers. So they are the big three on the bottom. You see Stalin, FDR, and Winston Churchill, and the countries they are representing. So they are not likely allies because Stalin and the Soviet Union, they are communist. And so the fact that the U.S. is democratic, the Great Britain's a constitutional monarchy, so you have like parliament and examples of kind of this democratic point of view. They kind of don't like the ideas of communism, so they really don't want to work together. But the fact is that, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So because they both see Hitler as an enemy, they have to work together in order to defeat their common enemy. So the Allies met to discuss the invasion of Europe. Stalin pushed for a direct U.S. Great Britain invasion of Western Europe. At this point, his troops were the only ones fighting in mainland Europe, and he wanted help. He hoped that opening a Western front would relieve his army in the east. Unsure of the untested U.S. forces, another front was agreed upon. So this leads us to Operation Torch. So again, we began in northern Africa. So the North African Campaign, one of the main reasons why the U.S. chose to go into northern Africa first is that the U.S. troops were not well trained. A lot of them were not career soldiers. So they were either drafted, they volunteered, but they had 6 weeks of boot camp, and now they're being sent to fight. The U.S. did not feel it would be a good idea to send them to fight directly against highly trained, highly skilled Nazi forces. So the North African area, it was still controlled by German forces, but they weren't as strong. So they said that would be a good chance for the soldiers to experience battle, gain experience before they went into mainland Europe. So fall of 1942, the Allies invaded Morocco and Algeria in northern Africa. This is the first real combat test for U.S. troops. It was mostly tank warfare. U.S. troops were led by the unstoppable General George S. Patton. Patton's 7th Army pushed east against Hitler's tough Afrika Korps. Defeats were followed by victories as the U.S. troops gained valuable experience. By May of 1943, with Brits pushing west out of Egypt, Nazi troops retreated out of Tunisia and into Italy. So with victory in Africa, Hitler is now in retreat on two fronts, and the Allies are planning their next move. So the U.S. U.S. and Great Britain together are able to kind of liberate northern Africa, eliminate Nazi control in that region. So Operation Torch. So again, just another overlook of this. So you see U.S. is coming in from Casablanca, Morocco, and then on the other side you have British forces coming in from kind of the east. So they're kind of coming in together to push out the German forces. So next we're going to look at the Italian campaign. So as most logical sense, the troops are over in this area for them to make that jump into Italy. So the invasion of Italy. July of 1943, Allies pursue retreating Germans and invade Sicily. The Italian army was also seen that they were not as strong as the German forces, so it seemed like it could be, again, an easier task for the U.S. troops to tackle. Patton's 7th Army dominated Italian forces and captured the island. From Sicily to Tunisia, U.S. troops invaded the Italian peninsula. Italian resistance begins to collapse, and the Italian people depose Mussolini. So the Italian people began to turn on Mussolini. So he is losing his control over his country. So Hitler is determined to hold Italy. He doesn't want to see it liberated like North Africa, and he wants to keep the Allies out of Germany. So Hitler sends massive reinforcements to Italy to prevent this from happening, and so this Italian campaign becomes a bloody and hard-fought battle. So when we think about some of the outcomes, we think about reviewing Operation Torch, the Italian campaign. We're seeing a lot of experience for U.S. troops. We're seeing tides changing where we are winning battles. But again, we're not in mainland Europe. So while we are able to liberate some areas, it's not a complete change of the war. So we have the Tehran Conference. So this was December of 1943. So the big three meet in Iran and they commit to opening the Western Front. And so this is what Stalin had wanted. Western Front meaning an invasion of Western Europe, primarily France. Also during this time we have minority war heroes. Minorities contributing to the war effort. So armed forces were segregated at this time. So they were not, you had separate African American units. So examples like the Tuskegee Airmen, they were an all African American air squadron. They flew missions, were highly decorated. And there was also the 442nd Regiment, which was an all Nisei, Japanese American Army company. And so these Japanese Americans, they were taken from, or not taken, they volunteered from their internment camps to go fight. They were not allowed to fight on the Pacific Front, so they fought in Europe. And they were the most decorated company in U.S. history. So now, Operation Overlord, and this is the code name for the D-Day invasion. And so the planning for this opening of the Western Front begins. So with Germany retreating in the east, in the south, the Allies begin plans for the invasion of France. So we'll talk more about D-Day in the next set of notes, more details. But here pictured you see is Dwight D. Eisenhower, and he would be the commander of Operation Overlord. So I have a few slides, extra slides. This is a picture of my husband's grandfather, Eugene L. Baird, and so he fought in the U.S. Army, and so he kind of followed this path that we were just talking about, fought in General Patton's 7th Army, served in Northern Africa, Sicily, and Italy. Fought in the battles of Casablanca, Anzio, Kasserine, Messina, Palermo, Monte Cassino. These are the different medals that he was awarded for his fighting. My husband also had another grandfather who was military police. So he was going to fight in the war, but because he was 6'7", he was very tall. So they actually, he was handpicked to stay back and guard FDR at his house in Hyde Park. So this next photo is of my grandfather, Frank Guerrero, and so he fought in the Army. I don't know the exact dates, but I believe he started fighting in 1943. He was born in 1924, so he was younger than my husband's grandfather, and so he fought in the Pacific, fought in the Philippines. Afterwards, he was stationed in Japan, and so He brought home with him different artifacts from the war. He has a few different Japanese flags. So this is one flag that we have framed. And so you can see the writing on it. And so this was from one of the Japanese soldiers. And so we did have it translated. And it was basically everyone from the soldier's village wishing him good luck, fight for your country, honor Japan, do not disgrace us, all that kind of stuff. So he had a few other ones that didn't have writing. He also has, a few different types of guns and weapons and whatnot. And so my aunts and uncles, my father, have all these things put away. So this is the end of our notes today. We still have, we're going to also do 6.6, Victory in Europe. Also, don't forget to study for your key term quiz that will be tomorrow.